It's Joey Wagner. After the off week, how are you, buddy?
I'm good. Got a chance to get away for a weekend. I missed the Kansas scrimmage. Looked like you and Piper exhibition, I should say. I guess looks like you and Piper handled that. Pretty good atmosphere. Looked like good game. Illinois looked good, but back ready to go. Final 4 games this football season. And by the way, Jeremy, it's November, so it's also basketball season for us too.
How was Nashville?
It was good. We don't do all the Broadway stuff. My friend lives there. We hit some dive bars around. And I say dive bars, they're not like horrific dive bars. It's just not the Broadway thing, right? And I feel like if it's not Broadway.
For people who don't know, that's kind of our scene when we go on the road.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to our annual, or I guess every other year, trip to Minneapolis. Hit 2 this year at the Big Ten basketball tournament, Jeremy. Our normal bar there and a Juicy Lucy. This be a good. What a couple weeks here.
Can't wait. Well, we got a 6-pack of questions to preview Illinois against Minnesota. The line moving in Illinois' direction for this one, by the way, Joey. Started off 4 points. Minnesota started as the favorite. That has moved to about 1.5, 2, depending on what book you look at. But obviously, if Illinois, I think, has any delusions of making a bowl game or any realistic opportunities of making a bowl game, a trip to Iowa is never easy for me. And I know they're beatable because they don't score many points, but boy, that defense and special teams are really, really good. So I think maybe not must win, Joey, but bowl game, you need this one after what happened against Wisconsin.
You do. Man, there's so many opportunities, right? If you look back over the course of the last 8 games, that this wouldn't be it's always going to be an important game, but if you're going to say you got to win 3 of the 4, your pick isn't going to be in Iowa City. And they've got to win 3 of the 4 to get into a bowl game. They'd like to obviously go 4-0, but they've won back-to-back games in a calendar year. So got to see what happens. It's a huge game, winnable game. That's the thing. Like, Illinois is in a stretch of winnable games. Iowa would probably be the most difficult, but this is a very winnable stretch to get where they need to be. It's just a matter of doing something they haven't done all year and stringing something together for a couple weeks.
All right, Joe, so let's get into our 6-pack of questions here. And number 1 is Illinois coming off the off week. What did they gain most during the off week?
Health and rest. I would say, honestly, there's self-scouting, right? There was on-the-road scouting, all of those things. But you went into the week knowing that Johnny Newton was not going to be available for the first half in Minnesota. That means Keith Randolph, you're putting that dude on in a full body cast, bed rest, right? To make sure he's ready to go. It sounds like he will be. We'll see what happens in Minneapolis. Reggie Love, getting him back to complement Caden Fagan. And then you just look, obviously there's nicks and bruises here and there, right? It is 8 Big Ten or 5 Big Ten games, 8 football games going into it. But I think you've seen, especially on the offensive line, as they've gotten healthier, Josh Geske, Zy Chrysler in particular, they play better football. They just have. Zy Chrysler has played better football the last 2 weeks, and he's healthier. Josh Geske, I think Bart Miller would tell you, he didn't play him probably as much looking back against Wisconsin. They really wanted to get him to the bye week. But you saw a little bit of him, and it's kind of the way that he had been playing before he got hurt. So, I don't know. Is that a cheap answer? I just think getting rest, getting health was so important for this team.
That's what I wrote, health. You hope, right? Because, listen, if you would have played Minnesota last week and Johnny Newton is suspended for the first half, and Keith Randolph wouldn't have played. He would not have played. Brett Bielema said he was basically on track to be cleared this week, and we'll talk with Brett Bielema on Thursday to get any kind of update of whether he's practiced or not. Keith, it still seems like he's a little questionable. We don't know for sure whether he will play quite yet. We'll probably find out 2 hours before, but there's at least the chance. So the fact that you could get another potential NFL player on your defensive line when you're going to miss one for the first half, I think is really important. I think Reggie Love gives you an upgrade at running back, whether that's the first guy or second guy, doesn't matter. They're going to rotate those guys. Caden Fagan's been taking some hits here recently. It's nice to get him an off week and rest up a little bit. Isaiah Williams, I think, has probably been more bumped and bruised than people would know. So to get him healthy a little bit, just the entire roster. And I agree with you. Josh Geske is a big one. Zy Chrysler getting more time off. I think it's important for those guys to get going because this game is about bringing your hard hat, Joey. How has Illinois beaten Minnesota the last 2 years? They've outplayed them in the trenches. And 2 years ago, that was a shock because, Minnesota was loaded on the offensive line a couple years ago, and Illinois' defensive line dominated them, and the offensive line was kind of Isaiah Adams one of his coming out party games, I thought 2 years ago. So to get that rest and maybe a couple extra days to prepare for the coaching staff, I do think that matters. Brett Bielema mentioned he's 3-1 after off weeks at Illinois. One of those against Charlotte, but 2 of those were against Big Ten teams. So I think all those things are beneficial.
I would like to know what Brett Bielema has, like what little random stats he has in the bookie. I know that obviously coaches, for people who don't know, are given some stats and info on their way up to the podiums. I'm getting the sense he doesn't need a lot in some of those stats. But yeah, you're right. And I think they mentioned trying to watch the Minnesota game last week live, in which a fifth-string running back, much like Illinois is kind of flirting with, went in there and had a really good football game. So the extra days certainly doesn't help. I mean, now I think when we say that doesn't mean that, they're funneling all that information to the players on Thursday of last week, Friday of last week. It's just more intel for them to build into the game plan. Certainly the players are doing their own thing and are able to watch these games and do that. But that doesn't, I don't want any misgivings that beginning last Monday, they're like, it's all Minnesota here on out. There's a lot of get right work, Devo work, things along those lines.
Well, you lead me right into the next question. Number 2, what issue did Illinois have to address most during the off week? And I'm going to steal one. I'll go first here, Joe. I'm going to steal one from you of what you wrote after the end of the Wisconsin game. And that's the end of half defensive issues. Listen, I know the offense still has things it needs to work on, but I think largely 7 of the last 8 quarters have been pretty good for the Illini offense. Like, I'm encouraged by what they've done. When you look across the rest of the Big Ten West, there's some explosiveness to this Illinois offense a little bit. It needs to be more consistent. But defensively, these end of half letdowns, Wisconsin, 2 of their touchdowns were at the end of the halves, right? And the end of the first half, especially, Joey, when you have a chance to go in, would have been up 14-0. Yeah, 14-0. You had it, the stat. The opponents have scored 5 times on the final possession of the first half. 4 of those are on touchdowns. Now, Aaron Henry's job is to go back and look, is anything of that have to do with what I'm doing schematically? And at the end of the Wisconsin first half, not the end of the game, he did run more zone. And Brett Bielema brought that up in the post game. But also the players, man, got to execute. Got to have a sense of urgency, even at the end of the half. You can't just feel like we're going to be up 14-0 and we're going to win this game. Aaron Henry talked a lot about a sense of urgency from those players that we got to learn how to close these games. And I would say close these halves.
Yeah, I would be shocked. I mean, just mentioning the zone, Minnesota's still got a first-year starting quarterback. He's got 8 games, 9 games, whatever it is, under his 8 games under his belt. I would be shocked if they go to zone at the end of the first half this week. Like this, he's a young quarterback still. Try to confuse him. I think that's a huge one. I'll go to the other side of the ball, Jeremy. Offensively, score more points. Like, I mean, I'm not. That's so cheap. I get it, and it's so. But that's what this offense is missing, is those trips to the end zone. It's kind of like a big holistic offensive picture of a year ago. Remember Chase Brown had all the yards, but when you tried to talk about these end-of-year awards, like, well, they didn't score touchdowns. Like, the offense has, in a lot of ways, not consistently, but they are putting up yards. Those are like very heavy drives and light drives, but they're moving the ball in a lot of ways, but they're just not getting into the end zone. And they've got to figure out how to get consistently down there, get themselves chances in the red zone where they've been better, and get some points on the board. Because in the Big Ten West, if you can score points, you're the best offense in the West. Yeah, now, I mean, the West does not score the ball very well. I mean, I'm gonna miss. Am I wrong?
No, you are right. And here's what I think of a key to that is they have to more consistently get to the red zone, right? Like when they get to the red zone, they are converting this year. They're 87% touchdown percentage. Once they get to the red zone, they fixed that issue. Their issue right now is just getting there. I was just doing the quick math. They're averaging 2.8 red zone trips per game. Last year, it was close to 4, right? So think about what a difference a field goal would be. I mean, how many field goals has Illinois made this year? 6? Like, just getting some of those points would really help if Illinois can just get across the 40 a couple more times. Not even the red zone, Joey. Just like get across the 40, get across the 30, and get some of those opportunities to put points on the board. They need to have more of those 8-play drives, like more consistently have those 8-play drives listen, this team's been more explosive. They've had more of those explosive 5 or 6 play drives this year. That's a step in the right direction. But unlike last year, they're not putting together those 8+ play drives that just get you to the red zone and get you some kind of points that would make the difference in some of these games. Especially obviously Wisconsin would have helped you win time of possession. That's what this Minnesota team does extremely well. Is they win time of possession, they grind you, they limit the opponent's possessions. The Illinois offense needs to play a little bit more complementary football and keeping the defensive off the field, but also just give themselves a chance to make some 40+ yard field goals. Like that would be a positive for this team. But once they've gotten in that scoring zone, I'll give a lot of credit to Barry Lunny for the play calls, but also Luke Altmaier. He is a weapon. He's hard to contain once you get in that red zone. So just get there more often.
Yeah, their offense is interesting. So, I mean, if I tell you right now, they're averaging 365.5 yards a game. That's 6th in the Big Ten, 2nd in the West. It doesn't feel like that because there's like 80
points.
Well, that and there's like 80 play drives, and then there's like 10, 15 or less play. Like they go very, very cold.
That 80 yard drives. Yeah, it's like
I'm sorry, 80 yard drives, and then like 3 or 4 3-and-outs, right? Or 3 and 4 where you get one. It's very feast or famine. Got to be more consistent because that'll allow them to get some more of those red zone opportunities and be able to take advantage of what they have significantly improved. That might be the most offensive improvement we've seen of this team year over year.
All right, number 3, big storyline going into this game. How does Illinois' defense survive the first half without their superstar Johnny Newton? I saw Dane Brugler had him number 21 overall in his new big board at The Athletic. And then I talked with Jordan Reed. If you haven't, check out that story. He had him number 14, I think, in his latest mock draft going to Lante's Arizona Cardinals at the time. I think they've gone up with Houston Texans loss to number 12. So obviously top 25 pick. How do they survive that first half before he comes back? Probably with a lot of urgency in that second half.
Yeah, you hope Keith Randolph is back. You put Gabe Akis' hand on the ground, and you might try to dial up a little bit to make a quarterback uncomfortable. You try to rattle him as much as you can. But stop the run. Like if you can stop the run against Minnesota, you're going to take your chances with what you got. And obviously that's hard to do with, one, the way that they run the ball. They're very good at that. They have been. And also just not having Johnny Newton. Like it's hard to stop the run when you don't have a top 25 pick. That's what it is. The first half is survival to me. Survive. Well, I don't know what you would call a win, a first half win defensively if Johnny Newton is not out there, but you've got to stop the run and you need Keith Randolph back. You really do. And then you just kind of patchwork by committee until you get to that third quarter.
Yeah, obviously Keith Randolph isn't as disruptive as Johnny Newton. Nobody right now in college football on the interior defensive line is, but to get him back and then pair him with Gabe Akis. Because, Joey, I fully expect Gabe Akis to be a defensive lineman again, despite Brett Bielema last week saying he's an outside linebacker. Maybe that's just discussion with Gabe, or maybe he's just not trying to tip his hand to Minnesota. But, talking with Terrence Jamison, defensive line coach, he said Gabe has been dual training at both outside linebacker and defensive line. But with potentially Randolph still questionable and Newton out, I would imagine they're trying to get their best talent on the field. I love that. I loved what they did against Wisconsin, getting Gabe Akis on the interior defensive line, played about 50 snaps there. And I just thought his strength held up at 265 pounds. Like you can see how strong he is against Wisconsin's defensive line, but also his quickness. He's quicker as an interior defensive lineman than he is as an edge rusher. So I'm expecting him to stay there long term. I know that's a big topic, but I just think he's good there. But in this game specifically, he's better than your other options. Like Sed McConnell is a nice rotation player for them right now. Bryce Barnes, nice rotational player. They're going to need those guys to step up too, but they're not as good as Gabe Akis as a defensive lineman. And Alec Bryan or Ezekiel Holmes and Seth Coleman are better, more impactful players than whoever you'd have on your interior defensive line. So if you get Keith Randolph back and have Gabe Akis, I still feel like your defensive front can be pretty good, but they have to hold up against one of the better rushing attacks you've seen this year. If Darius Taylor comes back, their freshman running back has been a stud this year. Their offensive line is really good at the tackle positions, but there is some opportunity on the interior of that offensive line with John Michael Schmitz now in the NFL. So I feel like you can make do there, but boy, you got to be physical because Minnesota's offensive line. Like their identity is what Brett Bielema has been trying to build here.
Do you try to dial anything up? I mean, do you trust your secondary? Trust where Minnesota's at as a passing offense? I think you would try to get Kanena Odeluga, try to get Dylan Rosiak and James Kreutz to get after the quarterback, because he's had some growing pains.
You certainly go, man. Daniel Jackson is a concern. He's a very good wide receiver. But the rest of their guys, I feel like Xavier Scott can cover Corey Crooms. I feel like Taz Nicholson can cover Daniel Jackson, and allowing man-to-man might allow Taz to kind of shadow, right? Daniel Jackson or Xavier Scott, whoever it is. But I'm not as concerned about whoever Zach Toby or Tyler Strain has to play unless they get matched up with Daniel Jackson, of course. But then you have Miles Scott over the top. So, yeah, this wide receiver crew doesn't scare me. Brevin Spann-Ford, the tight end, had a huge year last year. He's got 15 catches for 100 yards. Like Tip Ryman has outgained him. And Brevin Spann-Ford was an all Big Ten preseason guy. So they don't scare me with the passing attack. And the one thing about Ethan Kaliak-Manis, he's got talent, man. Like he's got an arm. He can throw it downfield. He's not that accurate with the ball. His ball placement is not great. So if you're in man, that might give you some opportunities.
Yeah, that's a great point. And it's a young quarterback too, right? I mean, I know he's got all these games this year under his belt. You want to try to get to him. Yeah, I'm really curious to see how Aaron Henry just tries to get through this first half. And beyond that, like, can we just zoom out really quickly? I'm fascinated to see what Johnny Newton looks like, because I'm sure he's going to be pissed off, right, that they didn't play the first half. I'm just really like, that is such an interesting dynamic, because I don't know that you and I have really covered, and definitely not to a player of Newton's level. We've covered
Stanley Green had a couple.
Stanley Green missed a few first halves, yeah. But like the way Johnny Newton can wreck a game and wrecked the last game, like what he does in the second half and how he looks and the intensity. And I don't think intensity is going to be a problem, by the way. Yeah. Like that is just so what a storyline, right? To go into this game and just seeing what that looks like after halftime with them.
I'm trying to remember, like Stanley Green's the only one that comes to mind of a targeting suspension for me. The most recent one that I can think of.
There's got to be another one, right? Like, there's got to be a line. Like one doesn't seem like enough. The way, because I mean, it seems like targeting.
Did Delshon Phillips ever have one, or I don't? None of it's coming to mind. I mean, I've forgotten a lot of what I've covered.
Did Milo Eifler have one?
It might be. That sound. But none is impactful as this one. Obviously,
I can't even Google Illinois football targeting right now, because like. The way SEO works is I'm just going to get 162 Johnny Newton stories. Yeah.
That's right. This episode of the Illini Inquirer Podcast is brought to you by BetterHelp. Give online therapy a try at betterhelp.com/Illini and get on your way to being your best self. Do you ever feel like your brain is getting in its own way? Like you know what you should do, what's good for you, but you just can't do it. Well, therapy helps you figure out what's holding you back so you can work for yourself instead of working against yourself. If you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. All you have to do is just fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist. And if you and that therapist don't mesh, you can switch your therapist at any time for no additional charge. So make your brain your friend again and give BetterHelp a try. Visit betterhelp.com/Illini today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/Illini. All right, Joey, let's go to number 4. What concerns you most about this game at Minnesota?
Not having Johnny Newton for the first half.
That was on my list.
If you can hold, let's talk about, like, what does surviving the first half look like? You get him to 10 points, 7 to 10 points. I would say that's a win
against this offense that doesn't scare me, but they can control the clock. That's for sure.
Right. Yeah.
You hold them to 10 points going into the half. Like, I got to count on your offense to match that. We'll see if they can, but I think that would be a job well done by Aaron Henry and his defensive players.
Yeah. I'll say just kind of letting it get, they score maybe 13 and your offense doesn't get it going. And you face a first half deficit before your best player gets on the field. Like, just not having him is a concern to me.
Yeah. Obviously the physical Minnesota rushing offense against an Illinois.
That goes hand in hand a little bit, though.
Yeah. The rushing defense has been, I think they've been really pretty good through the first 3 quarters of the last 2 games, but Roman Hemby kind of got loose in the fourth quarter for Maryland. And then Braylon Allen had a spectacular fourth quarter against Illinois. So getting worn down by that run game. Like I feel like Illinois will battle. They can do it for 3 quarters. Can you do it for 4 quarters? That's what they got to show. We can talk all about the passes they've given up. Those runs have just been killer by some of these teams here recently. Tyler Newman concerns me. He is potentially the best safety in the Big Ten. He probably is the best safety in the Big Ten. Brugler had him as the number 1 safety in the draft coming up. So former 4-star in-state kid that Lovie Smith wasn't able to get. PJ Fleck was. Brett Bielema seems like he's going to win a couple more of those recruitments and not let PJ Fleck steal all this Illinois talent because, boy, this roster is loaded with them. But he's a great free safety. So Luke Altmaier has to beware of him because he can go get the ball.
Who was the safety? Did Lovie coach his dad in the NFL? He's a stud in the NFL now. I'm drawing a blank on his name. I'm sure is he not at Minnesota before this?
Antoine Winfield?
Yeah.
Pretty good player.
Minnesota does pretty well with safety.
They're great. They're a very good program. Just a very good, consistent program that no matter what you think of PJ Fleck, like he recruits well, he develops well. He has coaches leave all the time, but seems to replace them pretty well, except for Joe Rossi, who has stuck around here. They have an identity, and they
know exactly who they are, dude. They know exactly who they are.
And their depth is phenomenal. Like, they lose all these running backs all the time, and they continue to get guys who run for 100-plus yards per game. They got DBs that have gone to the NFL. The Bears drafted one, Terrell Smith, last year. Their offensive linemen continue to go to the NFL. They don't seem to always have a bunch of great front 7 guys, but they seem to have depth there, and they seem to have some strength and physicality there. So he's kind of built what you want Brett Bielema to build, and Brett Bielema's beat him twice in a row here. So we thought Illinois could maybe be the same tier, maybe surpass Minnesota, but Fleck is in year 7. He's recruited class after class, and that seems to be what Bielema's missing right now is that in between of juniors and seniors that can bridge the gap, or maybe even sophomores with this first recruiting class of getting to his recruits that he's bringing in now. And we can see the talent of Fagan, even a Malik Elzy or Toby or Sabur Kareem. Those guys just need more development.
Yeah, it's the benefit of being in year 7, right? I mean, that is – it can't go understated. I feel like sometimes it does. It just does because you want results quickly. Mm-hmm. And especially the way those offensive line for Illinois, there's not a lot of depth. They're playing much better. I know we're going to touch on that very shortly. But there's just not a lot of depth there. And the positions that Minnesota has depth at take time to develop it. And it's the benefit of being in year 7, knowing what you're doing, developing them, knowing what you're looking for, developing them. And once you get that, you can start thinking of teams like that, right? But programs that are built on the offensive line need time to get those guys ready to go. Minnesota has that. Illinois is getting there.
Yeah, and Fleck's first couple of years kind of mirrored Bielema. I mean, he was 5-7 first year, second year 7-6. Bielema, and then he went 11-2, right? That 2019 year where it was Tyler Johnson, Rashad Bateman on those teams, just a fantastic passing offense. And then they went 3-4 to the COVID year, but since then 9-4, 5-3.
So consistent.
Yeah, just consistently in that top 3 of the Big Ten West and usually top 7, top 8 of the Big Ten. I know they want more. They want to win that Big Ten West title. They've become so close. And Illinois spoiled that a couple of years ago with their win over the number 20 ranked Gophers in 2021. But that's what you want. That's not a bad existence for a program in Minnesota that struggled for most of the decade before between Glenn Mason and PJ Fleck. So that's what Illinois is looking for in Bielema. Maybe needs a little bit more time, but boy, if you can end the season a little bit better, Joey, you'd feel better about building and recruiting that depth that Fleck has built.
Yeah, Bielema and Fleck, personality-wise, very, very different individuals. Most people are different personality-wise than PJ Fleck. But a lot of their values of program building and what they look for, how they go about it, how they develop, those are pretty similar. They're very similar.
Bielema has mentioned this a couple of times.
Yes.
He and PJ are very different people, but I respect what he has done because was it Carter Coughlin that played for him with the Giants? He said Carter raved about him, about their fundamentals in the program, what they believed in. So that's how I've always been with PJ. He's not my cup of tea, but boy, you got to respect what he's done there. I know Illini fans are sitting there going man, I didn't know this was a Minnesota love podcast, but that's kind of the program you want to build.
And then you want to be able to you want to have this guy who's won these Big Ten championships before to elevate you past that. But you've got to get there to go past it. And I know Illinois came so tantalizingly close last year. And here's the reality before we move on from the Minnesota Love Fest that half the people have hung up on us on. It doesn't matter if we like PJ Fleck or if people listening like PJ Fleck. If the guys who commit to him and play for him and stick around to play for him like him, the rest of it doesn't really matter.
It's not a huge wave of transfers out of that program either, right? Like, and a lot of transfers want to go there. Like, they've done really well getting kids from Western Michigan the last couple of years. All right, Joey, what gives you the most confidence about this game at Minnesota for Illinois?
The way the offensive line has played in the last 2 weeks. Like Bart Miller said today, we've been a factor in games. He meant a positive factor in games because they were certainly for the first half of the season a negative factor in games. But they're playing, they're showing, they're not what they were a year ago, but they're showing flashes of that still being in the tank, right? And that ability to run, control the trenches. Let the line play pretty well against Wisconsin. You go back to how they ran the ball at Maryland. Like, they're getting there. A lot of that coincides with health. Zy Chrysler was not very good earlier in the year. He was not healthy by what we can get. And like, there's continuity. Health breeds continuity. So to have some of those guys, Isaiah Adams, with more of these games, knowing that Zy Chrysler is now next to him, or you go on the other side, Josh Geske, maybe not quite as much continuity because he had missed a little bit of time there before the open week, but you're starting to see that come together in a way. It's not going to be a Joe Morris semifinalist or whatever the case may be, but if it's good enough for them to be able to run the ball effectively, to be able to protect Luke Allmeyer, still a work in progress, certainly there on both fronts. But that is showing signs of what we thought it could be before the season. We thought it'd be better. Obviously, everybody did. But you're starting to see a little bit of that Illinois identity come back to the offensive line.
The first 6 weeks of the season, Illinois was the worst offensive line in the Big Ten. Okay? The last 2 weeks, they've looked like potentially the best offensive line in the Big Ten West. Maybe Minnesota ahead of them. I thought they were better than Wisconsin's offensive line 2 weeks ago. Maryland has some talent on their offensive line. I thought Illinois' offensive line performed really well in that game. They look like the offensive line we thought they would be, Joey, which is not a great elite one, but a good one. Like, this would be a strength of the team. The last 2 weeks, the offensive line has been a strength of the team. I know they've given up some sacks. Some of those are coverage the last couple, especially against Wisconsin late in that fourth quarter. They didn't give up a sack against Wisconsin, which is a really good pass rush during the first three quarters. And most importantly, they're just being physical. Caden Fagan helps, but I thought there were more yards to be had if Josh Geske were the left guard in that game. Like, I thought Hunter Whiteneck struggled and going through some growing pains, but I thought the rest of that group looked great. Julian Pearl's playing the best football of his career. Isaiah Adams looks like Isaiah Adams again, looks comfortable at right tackle. Zy Chrysler looks like Zy Chrysler of last year, of how we would have projected him going into a second year, right? Like, he looks like the player we thought he could be this year, and Josh Kreutz has just been solid. So I think that offensive line has become a strength of the team. So I do list that. The other one is Luke Altmaier, man. He's the better quarterback in this game. He needs to play like it. He's got to avoid those turnovers. But the last 2 weeks, his one turnover is what should have been a pass interference call, right? So that is really encouraging, the way not only his playmaking, but the way he's avoiding some of these back-breaking mistakes. And he's, Ryan Burns was just on the podcast, and he said, Luke Altmaier looks like the best quarterback in the Big Ten West. Now, that's not the greatest title, but he is a playmaker. And a lot of these quarterbacks in the Big Ten West just are not. So the fact that I have a guy who I feel like can make plays to change the game, big, explosive plays, gives you a chance as long as he doesn't make those huge mistakes to go along with him.
Yeah, I agree with that. But counterpoint, it feels like we've said that a few times this year, right? That they've got the best quarterback, that they've got the guy. Like, now it's time to go be that. Like, there's a lot of times that we've said, hey, they've got a quarterback who can go on the road and lead your team to a win, and they've fallen short of doing that in those instances. Now it's your ninth start in the Big Ten. You got that. Go do it. And not all of them certainly have fallen on him for the reason they weren't able to do it. Illinois had a litany of issues.
Yeah, he was not
Luke Altmaier.
He was not the problem against Wisconsin. Like, a holding call really hurt them in the offense there. Receivers really struggled to get separation. Maryland, he was really good, right? Like, Maryland, he was a good player. Probably the better quarterback in that game, to be honest with you, which is saying something how good Talia is.
Yeah, but now if you're that guy and
Yep.
like you've got that quarterback advantage, you need to maximize the quarterback advantage. That's not trying to downplay what Luke Altmaier has done, but like there's a reason we're talking about him as being the better quarterback in the matchup because he is, and you want to see him kind of take this thing and pull it along if he needs to do that. And he might not need to do that, right? That might not be something that's asked of him. And in the sense like they're running well in that case.
Well, and that helps him, right? The more you can run the football well and not put Luke Altmaier in 3rd and long situations, not to put the offensive line in 3rd and long situations, that certainly helps him and Barry Lunny Jr. But yeah, even Barry's mentioned this. Like, we are really encouraged about what he's done, like the things he can do. Now it's about consistency, and that's what a veteran does. And right now he's going into start number 9 this season. Like, now it's time to start looking like a junior, right? Like, he's a redshirt sophomore now, but now it's time to start looking like a veteran starting quarterback and really limiting those big mistakes, those negative plays that can hurt Illinois.
And probably hitting some singles.
Yes.
There's been some singles we've seen him just not hit, and he's hit a lot of doubles, a couple triples. You see him just value in 3-4 yard passes just to get up to it and get another one there. And again, that's just a lot of what this season, if you take out the Penn State stats, is exactly what we thought the season was going to look like for Luke Altmaier. Some highs that you think, okay, if they've got 2 more years of him after this, that's outstanding news for Illinois Oh gosh. And then some lows where it's like, yep, he did not start a lot before he got to Illinois. Like this is what we thought. And the Penn State game skews the numbers in a way that people just scanning stats are going to look at that and say, well, boy, that's not gone how it should. And that's not fair and accurate representation.
I'm glad you brought up that point, though, the singles, because those are like the veteran plays. Like that, you saw Tommy DeVito, like just take the single, take the 5 yards, get the 2nd and 5. Those are the plays that he needs to do more consistent. I think he's been a little bit better at those, and Barry's got to scheme those things up too. It's like, and make sure that that's the hammer point. Like, we want you to take your shots when you got your shot. Like, you got Casey Washington 1-on-1. That's proven to work. You got Isaiah Williams 1-on-1 in the slot on a slot fade. You take that shot.
Pat Bryant.
Yes. But especially against Minnesota, if there's like a zone coverage and you want to try and sneak it in before the safety and over the linebacker, let's just check it down to Aiden Lawfrey. Let's get to 2nd and 7 instead and see what we can do. Are you looking for unique and comfortable Illini gear? Well, Home Field is a premium collegiate apparel based in Indianapolis that emphasizes their commitment to creating incredibly comfortable, officially licensed apparel with vintage college designs. They feature a growing collection of over 150 colleges to choose from, including, of course, the University of Illinois. So go check out homefieldapparel.com because their designs are super unique because they delve into the archives and history of each school using unique logos and iconic moments to create thoughtfully designed apparel. I'm scrolling at homefieldapparel.com right now with their Illini gear, and they have 1989 Fighting Illini basketball long sleeve. They got the Flying Illini logo, the script Illinois. You can get the pants, the joggers, that 1970s script, or a nice hoodie. They got the 80s Illini football helmet, the 2004-05 Illinois basketball logo on a vintage crew neck, the Ringer retro tee, the orange Ringer tee with Fighting Illini basketball on it. Go check these guys out because not only is the design fantastic, but these shirts, guys, are incredibly comfortable. Home Field is all about authenticity and nostalgia. So give their site a look. It's not the typical Illinois gear you see. You can find them at homefieldapparel.com where you can see their selection of colleges available, of course, including Illinois. And guess what? Our listeners get 15% off their first order with discount code Illini23. Again, 15% off at homefieldapparel.com with discount code Illini23. Whether you're looking for Illinois football gear for this season or Illini basketball gear for the coming season, check out homefieldapparel.com. All right, last one, Joey. What's the biggest thing Illinois need to accomplish or take a step towards accomplishing on the recruiting trail last week?
I've got 2. So why don't you start? Because I can merge around what you have.
Yeah, I got 2 things listed too, so I'm sure we have the same things. Number 1, I'll let you handle the JUCO thing. Keep your commits. Keep your commits. That is really important this time of year, and it is not a surprise and is not a coincidence that Brett Bielema on a Friday night, his one free Friday night, was in Starkville, Mississippi to see Trey Petty. him and Barry Lundy Jr. both decided to go to that game because he is really important, because I think he is the best prep quarterback prospect they have gotten committed so far. Respect to Donovan Leary and Cal Swanson. I think Donovan has a high floor. I think Cal Swanson has a high ceiling, but he's still got to develop a lot. But Trey Petty, I think, is the best quarterback prep prospect they have. Of course, Mississippi State going hard after him. I have a big question of whether Mississippi State will have a new coach or not come December, but Trey Petty is really important to this class. He's the type of quarterback depth you need to start getting. And, of course, all these other guys that you have committed, they're trying to get more prospects. A.J. Dennis, the offensive lineman, out of Michigan, they're going hard after. Dylan Stevenson. We know the Illinois assistants were in to see some of those guys that they're trying to get. But keeping your commits at this point with a 3-5 record and maybe not the season you want is really important.
We did have the same too. And before I get to mine, I want to follow up on the Trey Petty thing. Let's take Isaiah Williams out of the conversation because he ended up as a wide receiver. And I think pretty much every school saw that except for Illinois. Since you've been covering Illinois, go back before Bielema, and some of this is unfair, so we're just talking about as a prospect.
Yeah, I mean, Isaiah was a great quarterback prospect too. Like, I still think.
I know, and for me, I'm just saying throw him out because he's a receiver right now, and a lot of programs saw him as a receiver. Obviously, the answer is him if you put him in that conversation.
Yeah, going back through this list, I mean, Karan Taylor had things I liked. Physically, he had those. MJ Rivers was a pretty good prospect. But man, Trey with the dual threat, I think he's more refined than Karan Taylor was. Man, I think you'd probably have to go back to Riley O'Toole. No, because I mean, the Cuban era, they didn't get a bunch of top prospects. We were talking about Jimmy Fitzgerald and Chase Crouch and guys like that. So yeah, Lovey, Isaiah Williams was by far his best. Karan Taylor was talented. MJ Rivers was talented. But I think Trey Petty would be up there. Probably a Trey, Karan, and MJ Rivers would probably be my top three, but probably since Riley O'Toole for me.
That's a big deal. That's why you're in Starkville, Mississippi on a Friday night. I mean, when Tommy DeVito took a snap at quarterback, being the first Illinois quarterback in 20 years to do that. Look at Illinois football the last 20 years, right? Like you gotta have it. So you took mine. Keep your commits, and then go out and when you're not working on keeping your guys, we saw like George McDonald was down to see Carlos, or if you go and see your commits because you want them to know that hey, you've been committed for 5 months, 6 months, but we didn't forget about you. We're still in on, like we're still all here, and then you want to go shoot your shot for a Dylan Stevenson, for an AJ Dennis, for whatever other high school prospects you think you can flip or you think are out and available. But then Brett Bielema got on a plane early last week and hit JUCOs because junior college recruiting really didn't pay off last recruiting cycle. It hasn't to this point. But it really, really did before that. And a lot of the guys we talked about earlier in this podcast with Isaiah Adams and Zy Chrysler, the offensive line market, I know this isn't the most fun thing to hear all the time. If you can move, if you've got power, if you've got size, and you can play offensive line, you're going to have a lot of people after you. Like a lot of people. And the competition to get them is going to be intense. So you want to go after that, and you want to get that done early and try to go out and make some work in that junior college market.
Yeah, and Desmond Schuster, they expected to make an impact, I think, this year if he didn't have the medical issues that he did. So, some people tweet at me like, this JUCO thing did not work out for the offensive line. I'm like, it still has. I mean, Isaiah Adams is your second best offensive lineman, at least this year. And I mean, at times he looked like your best offensive lineman, right? Like last year, he was in the running for me potentially to be the best offensive lineman on a team that had Alex Palczewski on it. So he's been a huge success. Zy Chrysler started the last 2 years. I know how bad the beginning of the year went. The last 2 weeks, he's looked good. Like he has looked like a good starting Big Ten guard. And if you didn't have Zy Chrysler, you've seen the other options, Joey. Like it's not that good right now. So, and they thought Schuster would make an impact. So I'm not going to say it's going to fix all your offensive line issues, but boy, you need to go look for it. And Brett Bielema said they looked at 14 linemen. He didn't say offensive linemen, which I found very interesting. He said linemen because they are looking at JUCO defensive linemen as well. They looked at a JUCO edge rusher and offered Daniel Brown, who's leading the NCAA and National Junior College Association in sacks right now, like a 5-sack lead on everybody. So I found that interesting, especially with the Gabe Backus conversation we were having. They need edge. Well, they might if they move one of their better edges to the defensive line. But yeah, you need what, 2 offensive linemen, 2 defensive linemen, transfers. That would be my goal, is to get 2 guys, one that can start definitely on the offensive line, 2 guys on the defensive line, one that can definitely start. And then you look to the transfer portal as well. So I think those are the 2 by far biggest transfer needs for this team. So I'm not surprised they went back. They have good contacts there. Bart Miller and Brett Bielema have built good contacts the last couple of years, both in the Kansas JUCOs, which is obviously a huge one, and then down in Mississippi where they've gone. I'm sure they went last week. So it's important that they find a couple guys there. Brett Bielema said he looked at 14 linemen. They cut that list to about 8 or 7. He said, so that they're going to focus on. They've been pretty stealth about who those people would be, but there's a lot of talent down at those JUCO levels. And we know, Joey, like, yeah, you'd love to get the transfer offensive line or transfer defensive line. Those are expensive. Those are really expensive and really competitive. Like Keyshawn Blackstock, one of the top JUCOs. Illinois had him on official last year. They were in the running for him. He barely played at Michigan State. Look at his offer list as a transfer portal guy. Like, all these SEC, Big 10 schools, Big 12 schools are offering him just because he's talented, and everybody needs offensive line.
Yeah, there's backups that'll hit the portal. Backups at programs that develop offensive linemen that are going to go do very well for themselves. It's a market. That's what the market's set right now. So yeah, and look, Brett Bielema, especially when he's talking recruits, and especially when he's talking about offensive linemen, because the market's so insane, he can keep that pretty quiet. He prefers to keep that quiet. We've heard him mention before. I don't know that I would say it's a 1,000,000% truthful, but when Illinois offers, he says other programs jump in. And there certainly is an element that you've seen that happen, but some of that might also have just been going to have happened anyway. But he likes to find the correlation. Maybe there is some that exists, but so he keeps it down. He keps it quiet.
They kept Zach Chrysler very quiet. Like they
exceptionally quiet.
They did not want anybody to know that this kid was a qualifier. Like they're like, if they hear he's a qualifier, all of these SEC schools are going to come in, and by the time everyone else kind of learned Illinois had offered him, Illinois had it all done. Like it was like, oh, he's going to enroll in a couple of weeks. So that was really, really big for them. All right, Joey, let's go to our picks to click for the Minnesota game. Last week, 2 weeks ago, you picked Pat Bryant for Wisconsin. He had 1 catch for 27 yards. Started well, did not end well. Bad drop there. I had Zach Chrysler. Do I win 66.1 PFF grade?
I would say you do.
All right. And then I picked Taz Nicholson, had a pass breakup, 71 PFF grade. You had Nicario Harper, 70.8 PFF grade. So I'll call that a draw.
We'll give you the win overall on the week. And you got it for picking Zach Chrysler. Good for you. Good for Zach Chrysler for getting back, because let's just really quickly, like the way that season started for still a relatively young lineman who was like that could have derailed. Like that could have really spiraled. So good for the staff for getting him back in at right guard.
I think we mentioned we felt bad for him. Like it was obvious there was an issue. He was not playing well at right tackle. That was not, and I put that more on the staff than the kid, because he barely repped. He was hurt with the ankle injury, and then to throw him out there against some good teams in Kansas, obviously Toledo has won 7-8 straight games here. So Illinois, that win actually looks like it's holding up really well, but it's just, he was not ready to play that position, had not practiced enough at that position. So I felt bad for him. So the move is eventually paid off. I think the last couple of weeks. So I feel great for the kid that he's bounced back, because that could not have been easy. I mean, these kids read social media and they see it, and that's why you try not to make it personal, but it's obviously they need to make a switch, and that's why they did make a switch.
And they know how they're playing too. Like I don't know. You're obviously always going to defend, who you are, and it's a very tough position to play. But he knew. I mean, I would have to think he knew. So good for him. Like that could have gone a different way. That this season really could have gone a different way. So offense, pick to click. See that transition? I'm pretty good at this. Watch out.
Hey, you want to take the wheel sometime?
I don't at all. Who is my offensive? We can't pick Isaiah anymore, right?
I mean, now I guess you could, because he's actually been held to his 3 lowest yards from scrimmage this season, the last 3 weeks. Which
I'm going to do it because that is weird. That doesn't happen long. They had a whole week to figure out how to get this guy the ball in every imaginable way.
So what do you have to get? What do you have to get? 80+ yards to win with Isaiah Williams?
Yeah, that's fine. You can go higher if you want. Like, let's say 84.5. If he's over 84.5, I'd say that's a win.
Yeah, if he has like a touchdown and 60 yards, I'll give it to you.
Okay.
2 years ago,
by the way, did not last very long. Like, no Isaiah, no Johnny. I think we've already thrown those out.
All right. I should just go Fagan to match you, or take the guy who's going to get 20 touches. I'm gonna go off the beaten path, but there's a lower bar for me to win because of this. But 2 years ago, this guy scored his first touchdown in Minneapolis. Remember who that was?
Tip Ryman.
Tip Ryman. I'm going with Tip Ryman touchdown.
How does Tip win here? Is it
if he has like a touchdown, I think I should get the benefit of the doubt here, but I don't know, 3 or 4 catches and a tutty.
Okay, that's fine.
Okay. I'm going to Tip Ryman. I think they'll get in the red zone a couple times, and I like that they used him last game. Used the tight ends a little bit. All right, defense pick to click. Who you got, Joey?
Kanena Odeluga. I like the idea of them dialing up some pressure, especially without Johnny Newton. He's a candidate for that, very certainly. If they're going to stop the run, he's going to be involved in that, and he's going to be heavily involved in that linebacker spot. And I think those two, him and Rosiak, are playing. They're still playing really good ball, and it's pretty clear to me. I'm sure I would get pushback if I mentioned this, or if I asked Brett Bielema or Andy Boo about this, but it's clear to me those are the 2 top linebackers on the team right now.
Yeah.
So I'll take him. Honorable mention to Dylan Rosiak, but I'll go Kanena.
So if it's only a half of Johnny Newton, can I pick Johnny Newton? Because a half of Johnny Nutton's probably
yes. That's the only way. If I'm taking Isaiah, you can take Johnny Newton because he's only playing a half.
I'm not going to. I'm taking the next. Well, I'm not going to say next Johnny.
Lame.
I'm taking the guy who's going to probably be playing his spot. That's Gabe Backus.
All right.
Narrative, Joey. I'm always loving it. I loved what I saw from him as an interior defensive lineman. I think you gained 20 pounds in the offseason of strength. I think he can be a next level defensive lineman and be versatile. Like, he can play the 5 technique. He can play, I think, the 3 technique and be really disruptive. But they need him. They need him to make an impact, and maybe livens him up a little bit, because he was struggling. Like, Charlie Bolin said, like, he's frustrated. Brett Bielema had said he's frustrated. So I think that can liven him up a little bit. You're going to need your other outside linebackers to perform better with Gabe if he's going to be playing on the inside. But I'm going to go with Gabe Backus playing in the defensive line.
So how does the second half work when Johnny's back? Because we don't know about Keith, but what does that look like for Gabe to you?
Great question. I think it depends on Keith, right? It probably depends on Keith. And I don't know what their strategy is going to be. Is it going to be the bare front, 5 down linemen here, 3 down linemen with the 2 outside linebackers? Are they going to go to that with the team that loves to run the football? And they'll probably run a lot of man coverage against a passing offense that doesn't scare them that much. But last week against Wisconsin, they ran more 4 defensive linemen, right? They more of a 4-2-5 and kind of had guys widen those B gaps. Gabe Backus and Johnny Newton, then they have their linebackers filling in the A gap. So I don't know. It's going to be really interesting to see, but that's what I like about this defensive system. I know Purdue's struggling this year. I know Illinois is not living up to what it did last year, but the fact that you can be versatile, the fact that they can be multiple, I think is really good. And I think it's good for these players when you're going to the next level.
Yeah, I agree. There's something I was going to say. I cannot remember what that was, but we knew, like, when this all started in 21, we all knew versatility was going to be key. Then it played out. Then it's continued to play out. I think, you can argue against their decisions to go zone at the times they've gone zone, but I think they have a lot in their pocket defensively to be able to do. How much do they do at a high level? I don't know that you could say that, like you could say about the way they played man a year ago.
Which is why they simplified things after, I think, first 2 games. It's like, oh, we got all these new guys. We need to simplify it a little bit.
That's right. But I think they've also, and to steal a term from a few weeks ago, they've also done a good job of pretty routinely changing the picture, whether that's dropping the outside linebackers or not, or man or zone. You would just like to have maybe seen in the bye week they lean into what they're very good. They've identified we're very good at X, Y, or Z and really lean into that. So I think that's a little underlying subplot to go into this. And since there's no space for it, normal weeks, I'm already going to call my pick to click for Iowa defensively, and it's going to be Hugh Robertson. Because I think we put him defensively, and I think we could see a punt off in Iowa City.
Punter off.
I don't know why that came to mind. It's like, how do we pick a specialist here? How do we work them into this conversation?
Could he be an offense? He might be the offensive pick, right? Because Torrey Taylor is probably the best offensive player on Iowa.
All right. All right, cool.
All right, Joey Wagner, looking forward to getting a Juicy Lucy in Minneapolis. I'll see you on Friday, man.
All right, man.
This episode of the Illini Inquirer Podcast is presented by Underdog Sports. We see a lot of you are downloading Underdog Sports, using the promo code, and having fun, which we love to see. If you haven't already checked out Underdog Sports, be sure to do so. It's super easy to use. You go on the app, go pick whether favorite players will have a higher or lower stat total than what is listed. For example, Travis Kelce, he's very popular these days. If his number is set at 50 receiving yards and you know Taylor Swift is in the house, you may feel confident he's going to go way higher than the number. Do that with 2 to 5 different players and you're in business. If you go 5 for 5, you can 20x your money. So sign up today with promo code Illini and get your first deposit doubled up to $100. Visit UnderdogFantasy.com or find them in the App Store. And don't forget to register with promo code Illini to get your first deposit doubled up to $100. There are a lot of fantasy companies out there, but we decided to partner with Underdog because it's the easiest place to play fantasy sports. It's also the fastest growing fantasy app in the industry. You must be 18 or older and present in a state where Underdog Fantasy operates. Terms apply. Concerned with your play? Call 1-800-522-4700 or visit www.ncpgambling.org.